I am much of the way through, but not yet done with listening to a novel that I'm finding quite extraordinary. It's called The Only Woman in the Room by Marie Benedict. That's a pen name. And it's a fictionalized history. It's historical fiction about Hedy Lamarr, who was an extraordinary woman. And let's just go to this example first by way of introducing the idea that sort of expanded from this. In it, in the book, and I assume that this is more or less accurate. I have not gone and sort of checked it against biographies of Hedy Lamarr. She's got this awful husband. She's got this Austrian munitions dealer whom she is married to as a young, gorgeous actress, but she can't be an actress anymore when she's married to him because he says no. And her Jewish parents, who find her interested in this guy, not completely reviled by him at first, say it might be protective, given how much he wants you. It might be protective for you to marry him because Hitler's right over the border. And he, this munitions dealer who becomes her husband, is interested in independent Austria, in keeping Austria independent of Germany. Well, we all know how that ends up. And the husband, of course, becomes more and more controlling as men of a certain personality type, and as men, powerful men, historically often have been of the women in their lives. And so she's got, she's incredibly wealthy and she's stunningly gorgeous and also incredibly brilliant. But she's got, gowns and jewelry and all the best food, and she has, all of the amenities. But she's not allowed to go out by herself, and she's not allowed to pursue the science that actually her father has taught her and that she's very interested in, or her acting, which is what she had begun to do and was excellent at. And so she says, the Lamarr character in the book, The Only Woman in the Room, she says, "I wanted for nothing but liberty and purpose." And that struck me as exactly right. That many people's ideas of what they would give to people in their care is a life of leisure. Some of the ideas of heaven are ones in which there's nothing to be done but sit around idly and eat bonbons that are brought to you. And in fact, it's telling, I think, that in most of those cases, the people who themselves are imagining that they are trying to create a life like that for others do not want it for themselves. They know that. So this is often seen with, powerful men enacting control over women. It's seen with many kinds of parents, especially modern helicopter parents, enacting, control, which, looks like love and protection over their children. But in fact, children also, not babies, there's obviously a gradient from complete helplessness to complete unhelplessness, but you don't learn how to be helpful and useful and do work in the world and find value from your own, productivity or service or creativity or discovery or whatever it is that you are going to do to make meaning in the world. You won't discover if you are simply protected from all things that are useful. And many parents are doing that now with their children. And also, and this is a little farther afield, but many people who think of themselves as communists or communist adjacent imagine a utopia in which, yes, everyone has to do some kind of work, but the work you do kind of doesn't even necessarily have to match to what you're interested in or what you're best at. There's a certain amount of low-level work that needs to get done, and that will free us all to what? To like this leisure that what people aren't recognizing is leisure when earned is fantastic, and we can all look forward to it. And it is exactly what we can use as a reward as we're working through the parts of our work that isn't that rewarding. But if it's just leisure all the time, it quickly becomes its own kind of prison. And I think the thing that is missing, either intentionally or not, from all of these sorts of examples of people who want to protect others from work, is that meaning is found in work. There's like for much of us, the meaning of life is actually found in, struggling through figuring out what problems need to be solved, through discovery, through exploration, through creativity, through healing, through service to others, through protecting others, through a number of teaching. Like there are all sorts leadership. There are all sorts of verbs that you can invoke here by which you might actually find meaning, but they all involve work. And being protected from any of that is actually going to produce quite the opposite. And then you will enrage those people who have effectively captured you because they will say you're being ungrateful. How dare you not appreciate all I've done to protect you from ever having to work? Well, no, actually, there is value in work.
This is an error that I think comes from the path dependency of evolution having been discovered late in the history of people. Mm. And the reason is that
that's interesting.
You have cost, the amount of energy you have to spend to do something, the amount of time that you have to spend to do it, the amount of suffering that is involved in doing it. And you have reward, which is internally generated, right? Mm. Which is, I have that sense of accomplishment, or I've earned this time off and I'm going to savor it, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you are only paying attention somatically and you notice, the glorious thing is what comes after the suffering and all of the investment. And wouldn't it be glorious if, first of all, we do try to minimize, as we should, the amount of suffering and investment to get to a given level of reward, right? Mm-hmm. I used to tell our students that work was a necessary evil. Now, I did not mean that it is in any way desirable to not work hard. But the basic point is if you have two people who have to work a different amount to reach the same level of productivity, you want the one who worked less to produce the same amount of value. Mm-hmm. Not because that makes you, not because we're trying to get to a leisurely state where no work is involved, but because it means that you actually have room to do something else that generates more value. And hopefully, this is why I rant and rave to, I think, nobody's delight about the problem of the idea of recreation. Right? That fun is something you are supposed to have in the process of accomplishing something, right? And that when you start thinking that fun is the whole point, rather than fun is the reward to get you to be active and do something, you invert the system. And what we find out is exactly what you're pointing out, which is that people who have a life that looks like this often are not, wonderful people. They're spoiled brats. Yeah.
Or satisfied with their own lives.
Right. It doesn't satisfy you. Actually, it leaves you rudderless.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how we cure people of their understandable but very wrong instinct about what they think they want. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. But it's important that we do because, we have also talked about the fact that what happened to us that tossed us out of a set of careers in which we knew what we were supposed to do every day, right? That was a violent upheaval, but it did fill life with purpose. And it's not that the life that we had before hadn't any purpose. It had a ton of it. But the point is figuring out how to navigate in the world did create many interesting puzzles, and obviously the ability to have an impact, as people were paying attention to what we thought about various things, it created a lot of meaning. And I think, if you pursued meaning that was substantial to you, then you would find that all the things that you think you want without having to work for them are downstream of it. They would have to be, because for them to be valuable to you, you already have the circuit that will release those rewards at the point that you accomplish whatever it is.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's very well said. I think people who are pursuing that thing, retire before 30, become a millionaire before 30, or whatever the current number should be to make that make sense economically. It's begging for a kind of infantilized life and for being unmoored. And some number of people will be able to, having effectively, and I don't like this language because I don't like the idea that our time doesn't belong to us and we have to buy it back. But that's very, very, very backwards. And it sort of emerges with the Industrial Revolution, that whole concept that we are, that our labor is not ours to begin with, and our time is not ours to begin with. But certainly in the modern economy, having a certain amount of money allows you to have access to your time, which should have been yours to begin with. But of course, many people get their time back not by doing that, but by making different choices around what kinds of things they are going to be willing to never have access to. Not participate in the market economy in quite the same way, but have a tremendous amount of freedom in terms of who they are beholden to and how they can move around the world and how they're able to spend their time.
Yeah, there's a strange kind of communism in the idea that your time doesn't belong to you and you're going to have to buy it back, right? Because the idea is, well, no, you're working for the collective, you're working for the economy, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it's nonsense. Now, I did used to tell students, don't be shy about earning money and buying back your time. Now, of course, my point to them was not so that you can squander it on video games. My point was you want as much of your time as possible so you can do with it something you value, right? There's something dehumanizing about doing labor, the product of which you care nothing about, right? If you're filing somebody else's papers, if you're flipping burgers that you didn't, it's not that you've got a recipe for burgers, you're stuck in some job, the consequence of which is not important to you, that's in its own way a mini tragedy. And to the extent that you can recover your time and go do carpentry or art or, think deep thoughts and convey them or whatever it is that you find value in, you should do that. Because as you started with, the purpose in life is what actually drives the sort of deep sense of satisfaction. And if you look at what's happened to virtually everything, we talk in the book about the junkification of everything, right? Junk relationships, junk sex, junk media. Food, junk media, all that stuff. The point is, it's really about a very superficial thing that just gives you a little charge every now and again, rather than something, deeply investing in something and accomplishing it after a couple of years and feeling that, feeling months of joy at finally having produced whatever it was.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's out there, but it requires freeing yourselves from what the economy will do to you enough to be able to do what you want to do. Anyway, if I could wish something for everybody, it's that they would have enough, whatever it is. I hate to focus on money, but enough resource and flexibility to generate that room to do something, and then that you would do it.